Reading and writing files with Python. Let's use Python to open and close files, read from them and write to them, and let's talk about some methods we can use in the process. Let's first learn to open files. The open function here opens the file shoppinglist.txt to update it in the read mode. It calls this to-do. We have the following open modes in Python: read, write, exclusive creation, append, text, binary, and updating. The default is reading in text mode. Pause your screen and pay attention to the details. To-do is a text I/O wrapper. Along with the mode of opening, we can also suggest the encoding to use. By default, Windows uses the CP1252 encoding and Linux uses UTF-8. Here we open todo.txt in reading mode with the UTF-8 encoding and call it todo. And to close files and free up resources, there are three ways. With the close method, putting it in a try finally block, using the finally to close the file, and using the with statement. This opens shopping list as to-do, reads it, then closes it when it's done. Now let's learn to read from a file. Let's read the first 5 characters, open it in read mode and read the first 5 characters. This gives us the string get a. To read the rest, call it with no arguments and it will read everything that's left. And now that there's nothing left to read, it prints out an empty string. The tell method tells us where the pointer is. It is at character 80. Seek takes in a value and sets the pointer to that position. This one takes it back to character 73. Now, reading it still has something to print. Let's assume we're at the beginning of the file again. To read an entire line at a time, we have the readLine method. Do it again and you have the second line. And readLines reads the rest of the lines. Although it's a file, we can iterate on it with a for loop. We seek to character 0, then for each line in the file object, print it. This is so it doesn't introduce a new line character for each print statement. Now let's write to this file. Let's append to it, add content to the end. Close it, open it again in append mode and write break a leg. And it tells you it wrote 11 characters to this file. And then close it. Read it using the with statement. This reads the contents of this file and then closes it. So what are all the methods we can call on file objects in Python? Let's see. Close is to close the file and free up the resources it holds. Detach detaches the underlying buffer from text I/O base and returns it. If we detach the buffer and then read it, we cannot. File number returns the file descriptor of the stream as a number. And flushes the internal buffers to the disk. Whatever data is held by the buffer, it writes it to the disk and empties the buffer. So if your changes ever do not show up in the file, try flushing it and check again. Is a TTY tells us whether the file is connected to a TTY-like machine. TTY stands for text telephone and is a telecommunication device for the deaf. Read of n reads n characters from a file's beginning. Readable tells us whether a file object is readable. If we open it in append mode, it isn't readable. ReadLine reads until it reaches a new line or the end of file. It reads one line at a time. We can tell it how many characters to read, and an argument of -1 means it should read the rest of whichever line it's been reading right now. Read lines reads the rest of the lines in the file. Read lines of 0 reads everything. Let's seek the beginning of the file again and read just one line. Seek takes us to somewhere in the stream. Seekable tells us whether this is possible, whether the file supports random access. And tell lets us know where we are currently in the stream. Truncate takes a value and reduces a file down to that size. This one reduces shopping list down to 60 characters. Let's take it to position 20 in the file. Truncating now truncates everything else and keeps just the first 20 characters. If a stream is in such a state where you can write to it, it is writable. Since the default opening mode is for reading, to-do is not writable here. Write_s writes a string to the file. This writes 9 characters. OK, bye. These get appended to the file since we opened it in append mode. And write_lines takes a list of strings and writes them to a file. And that is how you read and write files using Python.